Greetings, everyone. We are going to have our budget session with the first item, solid waste services, fee proposal, and budget overview. Stan?
Honorable Mayor, Council, hello. Good to see you all again. First, the bad news. I forgot my glasses, so if you see me squinting at my notes, it's not, I haven't been the same since the eclipse, honestly. I hope everyone had a great weekend. The weather was beautiful. I did some gardening outside. Of course, watched that brilliant game from the women's NCAA. How exciting was that? They're on fire. And then just watched the eclipse outside. So everything has been really good so far. I was reading this article this weekend about a survey that was completed where they asked folks if the eclipse occurred at game time yesterday, would they watch the game or would they watch the eclipse? 7 out of 10 people said they would watch the game. What does that say about us as a society when we think about this celestial, once-in-a-lifetime phenomena, and we would skip it for a basketball game?
That was once in a lifetime. It was a great game.
Yeah, I'll be watching the game. I guarantee it. Yeah, for sure. So today, I kind of want to go through the agenda, but first I'd like to just say that my team is here with me. None of the work gets done without them. And I don't want to call them out because there's a bunch of them and I don't want to forget anyone, but they were instrumental in this budget proposal and I just absolutely want to bring that up.
Could they raise their hand, whoever's here?
Solid Waste Services team, there's one way in the back.
Thank you.
All right, so let's see. We had a great basketball game, an eclipse, and now the budget presentation. You're welcome. The agenda today, we're going to go and do a departmental overview. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our team accomplishments in 2024. Then we'll get into our base budget for FY25. We'll cover our proposal for fees in 2025, FY25, and then discuss some of our key initiatives on the horizon for our city. You'll recall our solid waste services in Raleigh, specifically our curbside program, offers truly a premium level of service to our residents as compared to other municipalities. This is evident, every other year when the ETC community survey comes out, we are ranked in the 80+ percentile for customer satisfaction. And I think a large part of that is due to the commitment of our employees. In addition to garbage recycling and yard waste collection, we offer residents free bulky, grease collection, Christmas trees, pickup, shredding events, and electronics recycling. If it's not moving, we pick it up. Including deer, squirrels, and possums with really bad sense of direction. We also provide central business district services, monitor a closed landfill, and we respond quickly to any unforeseen cleanup circumstances, for example, storm debris, illegal dumping, or special events like Dreamville this weekend. We also operate one of the largest yard waste processing facilities in this region. And again, I'll say it's a lot, but none of it happens without our employees. So let's talk a little bit about some of our FY24 accomplishments. I'll start off with our increased yard waste capacity, which stemmed from your support in making some yard waste enhancements probably a couple years ago. As a reminder, we enhanced our yard waste services in July of 2022. And then we took some time to evaluate the program. We listened to our residents, and we heard from our residents, and they said they needed some more capacity. So in response, July 2023, you all approved several changes that supported our ability to increase that capacity. On February 1st of this year, we went live, allowing residents the ability to request one additional yard waste cart at a small fee. As you can see up there, to date, we have received requests for and delivered 270 additional carts total. So that's less than 1% of our residents, so we'll take some more time to evaluate the program, continue to assess customer feedback, but at this time, we're not proposing any further yard waste enhancements. Another thing we accomplished, excuse me here, let me get on track, is our city's first ever comprehensive audit of the city's recyclables. You can see the results up here, and we've kind of divvied it out by quadrants, and it shows the residuals in the materials. So let me just talk a little bit about residuals. Residuals are essentially any material that we take to our processing plant that we are unable to recycle. So some people refer to it as contamination, trash, and there's a significant cost associated with those residuals. Our processor, Sunoco, charges us $75 per ton to take those residuals to the landfill. And so this is an approximate cost to the city every year of about $500,000. Now, I will say, you know, across the industry, the average residuals is about 20%. So me personally wasn't necessarily thrilled with those results simply because I know the city does better and we can do better. However, this audit gives us a really good baseline to start from where we can measure ourselves and we can take a more focused approach to our engagement and outreach so we can have a stronger impact on the residuals. But I've always said before that community outreach and education is really good when it comes to recyclables, but at some point you have to have some level of an enforcement component in order for it to be fully successful. I really love showing this slide simply because if there's one thing that never changed in the recycling industry is the fact that they're continually changing. They're unpredictable, it's volatile, and for context, if you recall, in 2012, it was the best thing since sliced bread. You know, single-stream processors were making lots of money selling recyclables overseas. You could sell a ton of single-stream recyclable for $150 a ton. Processors were making money. They were passing some of their profits back to municipalities in the form of a rebate. But then in 2013, everything changed with the green fence from China, where they said that the recyclables that the U.S. was bringing to them was just garbage and contaminated. So they shut that down, which significantly impacted the industry and the market, and it went into a tailspin, and we've never fully recovered. So I will say, despite its unpredictability, the City of Raleigh has been able to work and collaborate with our partners, our processors, and we're able to manage those risks and still continue to have a very robust recycling program in the City of Raleigh. One big opportunity we have in the city when it comes to recycling is our central business district. I think that we have a lot of opportunities to combat contamination in our district, and we've been working a lot with DRA and collaborating on a lot of re-education and re-outreach since downtown has stood back up. So I'm confident that we can continue to head in that direction and address that concern. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Our legacy pile. I hope this is the last time I use the term legacy pile. I've been talking about the legacy pile for 5 years, 400,000 cubic yards of backlogged organic material from the past 10 years collected, stored on site pile, 3 stories high and taking up 23 of 67 usable acres. But it's gone. And I don't miss it. And if you drive through, if you drive down New Hope Road, you can see the significant transformation of being able to use that space for our operations there. So what's next? I think looking at our current business model in the Yard Waste Center and making sure that it aligns and supports with city future initiatives is our next steps for the Yard Waste Center. So let's talk about our FY25 budget. We have 2 really important initiatives kicking off this year. First off is our transition to a full enterprise department. For context, solid waste has never really been a full enterprise department. 80% of our funding came from user fees, and the rest was subsidized by our general fund. But with the increase in costs and the unpredictability of the general fund, it became increasingly difficult to budget and plan. And we've got to do that because our city's growing, and we have to be more intentional about planning. So last year, the city manager recommended that we begin the transition to being a full enterprise. That's a big deal for us. Our second is establishing a CIP. We've never had one, so we're getting one. This is part of our fiscal evolution and a critical piece of preparing the department for the continued growth of the city. We'll talk a little bit more about these 2 later, but for right now, let's look at the FY25 budget. A couple of things worth mentioning here is the difference between the FY24 adopted revenue and the FY25 proposed revenue. When you look at it, you see they're very close in numbers, so one could probably deduce that there may have been little or no growth. But our FY24 adopted included a $1.3 million fund balance appropriation. And so without the appropriation, we really are looking at projecting about 2 to 2.5% of growth in our customer base, and that's good. However, our expenses are at a 6.5% growth rate, and that's not good. So let's talk a little bit about what's driving that. 3 main things, and this is not just the solid waste department, this is our city as a whole. I think personnel and the increased cost of benefits, cost of our maintaining our, I think, 6,000 plus vehicles in the city, and the increase in internal support departments from our indirect costs. These cost drivers leave the department really with about a $3.2 million gap for FY25. So for FY25, we're proposing a rate increase of $1.70 overall. That breaks down with 80 cents for our garbage, 70 cents for our recycling, and 20 cents for our yard waste. It's an average of about a 7.6% increase. Our special load and card increases are minimal, and they align with the industry standard, most of which accounts for a pass-through of the increase of cost of goods sold. So how do we compare with these new rates? This is a busy slide. I'll acknowledge that. I will also say that it's always difficult to compare our rates to other municipalities simply because we offer such a high level of service. It's not always apples to apples. So you can see, however, we do, despite that, still remain quite competitive. The green shade in the background, or olive drab, I'm colorblind, but the shade in the background really speaks to the population. And I do think that that is a factor as well when you think about rates and you think about the level of service that you're providing. I did not show the city of Charlotte. Part of the reason is because Charlotte's curbside services are kind of a hybrid enterprise like we used to be. 36% of it is user fees, and the 64% is funded by the general fund. But if you did some math on the back of a napkin, you'd probably land about $30 per month compared to these rates up here. So with the $1.70 rate increase, if approved, we'll close a significant portion of that budget gap of $3.2 million. And we'll take $1.1 million appropriation, and that gets us to the balanced budget. Another busy slide. I wanted to show this one for a reason. Well, a couple of reasons. I think, number one, it circles back to what I mentioned earlier in the presentation regarding our CIP and moving to full enterprise. I think that this trend supports that regarding looking out to the future and what we're going to have to do to get those things accomplished. Historically, rates, as you can see on the back end there from FY16, has been reactive versus proactive. But a city that continues to grow really needs to have a plan for growth and in order to maintain those reliable, essential services. With this approach, we can reach our full enterprise goal in 5 years. And you can see in some of those years, there's a 0% increase, and then there's an 11% increase. You know, we kind of landed at around 7% increase. And as you can see, as we project to the future, we want to stabilize that approach to making sure we have everything we need to maintain the reliability of those services. Talk a little bit about our vacancies. We have 210 budgeted positions in the department, and our current vacancy rate is 17%, or 36 average number of vacancies. I think much like other departments and municipalities across the country, we're facing this unprecedented challenge to find qualified candidates to fill jobs. It's not from lack of trying. We've gotten creative, altered our approaches. We utilize listservs. We activate North Carolina League of Municipalities to assist us. We pay for industry national associations like SWANA and APWA. I've even reached out to a couple military bases. A lot of military folks that transition from the military into the civilian life are CDL holders and have a great skill set. Also, departments are partnering with HR to have job fairs, and we have a job fair coming up in June that we're excited about. All right, as we move toward a full enterprise model in the next 5 years, I do believe it becomes increasingly important to align our services in a way that we can sustain them. Starting in FY25, we're going to shift our focus around 3 main goals. One is to reduce revenue leakage. Number 2 is to improve our methodology for cost recovery. And number 3 is to explore and make sure we're aligned with the best practices in the United States regarding enterprise service model. So can we take just a minute and let me talk about Jesse there on the picture. First of all, I will say that is not the way to recycle a large cardboard box. We would like you to break it down, tear it up, and stuff it in there so we can have some more capacity. I always like telling a story about our employees, and Jesse is in his mid-60s, and I think some of you know Jesse. He's got a midnight DJ voice that you cannot miss. And he spent years in Fort Lauderdale living in the tent city there, many years. And he worked his way up to Raleigh, and he has a great work ethic. He started out as a temp and was still homeless on the back of our trucks. And immediately our team recognized his work ethic, and he ended up working with us full-time. Jesse, in his mid-60s, can beat many of our 30-year-olds when it comes to getting up and off of that truck, which they do it hundreds of times every day. And I talk to him often. He has an opinion on every topic you could possibly think about. He's been with the city for 15 years. He plays the drums, an avid guitar player, you would never figure. And he always shows up on time with a cleaned and pressed uniform. When I was talking to him, he says a couple things to me. He says, "I never say no to what I'm asked to do because I may be changing someone's life with one act." Jesse's one story in solid waste services, but these stories are all over our city, and I always feel it's important while I'm up here to highlight one of those stories. Regarding our 5-year enterprise service model, on the side I have these services to evaluate. I think that, we do these, they're kind of away from our core service of residential services. But we do provide them, and I think that gives us a lot of runway in the next 5 years to really talk about it and evaluate every one of those services to see where the city lands on continuing that. All right, so let's look to the future. We're talking down the road. We've got a closed landfill. Covers over 300 plus acres. It's been closed for a very long time. We continue to monitor it, air quality, water quality. And we recently had a kickoff meeting to talk about what is really a huge commodity in Raleigh, which is land. And it was really cool, really exciting. We talked about once we've fulfilled our post-closure commitments and requirements, what can we do with this property? And, repurposing a space like this, landfills historically have been in, lower income neighborhoods, recessed demographically areas, those sort of things. And repurposing the site could have us reimagine that space in a way that we can actually, give back to that community. So we're really excited about that prospect. I mean, whether it's, a solar farm or a golf trail, the solar farm subsidizing costs for electricity, a wildlife habitat, a walking art park. I mean, the possibilities are endless, so it is something I think that we can create that the city can be proud of down the road. Our next steps is to identify a citywide steering committee and a project leader to develop and really start moving down this pathway. Another one on the horizon is City Organics program. Our residents wanted to know about organics and food waste and composting, so we answered. We are in the middle of an organics feasibility study that is underway by an engineering firm, SCS. We expect a final recommendation from that consultant in October. What can we expect with that recommendation? It's hard to say for a couple reasons. Number one is typically when you do a curbside setup for food compost or organics, it needs some level of infrastructure to be able to process that properly. We don't have a large infrastructure. We've got compost now, and they do a fantastic job, but it's a little bit of a small scale. And so, you could think of hub and spoke and transferring it, but that would be a huge cost with that. Of course, we just moved the legacy pile, so readying our yard waste center to do that is an opportunity to make it regional. So I'm not sure what they're going to find. They're going to look across the United States, see how these things work, and then come back to us. Maybe it'll be a pilot program. Maybe it'll be a centralized location to kick it off until we can figure out a plan to go bigger on that. So today, our recommendation is to authorize solid waste services to use the rate that we propose to begin programming and testing our billing system. That takes quite a while to beta test all of those things and notify our customers of the rate changes. And that is it. I'll take any questions.
Councilmember Branch?
First of all, thank you for the information and presentation. Couple questions. The first one is around, actually Wilders Grove. How large is it?
350 plus acres, but you know, when you think about the buffers and all that, I would say probably about 275, 250 usable potential acres. And I will caveat that with saying that the Wilders Grove landfill is a unlined landfill, so that may, I mean, there's been repurposing of unlined landfills, but it does present some challenges.
Okay. When we talk about the budget and looking at making changes, I know, you know, we're going through vehicles. They have a lifespan. What's the current lifespan of some of our trucks that are out there? And are there any ways that we're looking at efficiencies in trucks that, you know, they may cost us now, but in the long run will save us money based upon fuel and things of that nature?
The average lifespan of our vehicles is about 7 years. In the private sector, it's like 13. So we maintain a pretty good fleet of vehicles. I want to make sure I'm understanding your questions. Are you referring to like alternative fuels and different?
Everything.
Yeah.
I left it open to
Yeah.
give you space to walk in.
Yeah, so there's a lot we can do. I think we have a goal to convert some of our fleet for CNG. We already have some CNG vehicles. I think that we would love to have an electric vehicle, but I don't think the technology's quite ready yet in order to, you know, push these 80,000-pound vehicles around for 8 hours in the city. But they are ready, and they're moving quickly for, you know, the smaller pickup trucks and the sedan vehicles. We just got a brand-new sedan in EV today. I think we've been pretty aggressive with using B20 biofuel diesel, which is a cleaner burn than regular diesel. And we're trying to be more efficient about our routes. You know, I think going fully automated for yard waste was helpful. You know, we'd like to use as much automated side loaders as possible because they're more efficient. So we stay away from having 2-3 trucks in the area trying to pick stuff up. Okay. Hope that answers your question.
It does. It gives a direction. It shows that we're looking at other ways to be efficient with the fuel and make sure our trucks are modernized to help reduce costs as well. So I think I know technology is always evolving. So I think we just got to continue to look at where it makes sense with our personnel and everything. And my last question, which is around the personnel, of your 36 vacancies, what's the breakdown between operations and yard waste?
Operations and the yard waste.
Right.
The yard waste are also operations. So
Okay. Well, on the slide, you showed operations at a number, and you showed yard waste at 13 and operations at 162.
Oh, the yard waste center, I got you.
Yeah, yard waste center.
I don't know exactly what the breakdown is. I think overall it's 36 or 17%. I think the yard waste center, Marianne, can you come up here, please? I'm going to get you the most accurate answer from my team.
Good afternoon. I'm Marianne Sweden. I'm an administrative manager with Solid Waste. So currently we have 0 vacancies in the Yard Waste Center. We just made an offer for our final vacancy out there. That employee starts on the 15th of April. We also just made offers on 8 of the vacancies in operations that also start on the 15th. We promoted 3, so we just made 3 more vacancies that we get to fill. So we are actively, consistently recruiting those positions in operations. We just, sometimes it's great, we promote, and sometimes it's a matter of turnover.
Okay. So based on those promotions and movement, you could probably say that's probably a net gain where you're probably only down 31 instead of 36, roughly?
That's fair. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. You may want to stay close. I think, there's some factors in there as well, whether we get them through, so, yeah. Christine,
Councilmember Jones?
Councilmember.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to uplift Jesse. He is phenomenal, and I will say that when I did my shift with him, at the end, he didn't want my shoes to go into the car dirty, so he washed my shoes. And it was the sweetest thing ever. So
a true
Jesse
gentleman, a
he is
true
amazing
gentleman.
and love him dearly. But staying with vacancies, it's at 17% this year, minus what we just talked about there. What was your vacancy rate last year?
Last year, our vacancy rate was 16%.
It was 16, so it's up a percent this
It's
year?
up a percent this year, yeah.
And what do you think the main issues are that you're seeing with the vacancies, and how, with the work and all the work that you guys do, how does that affect that?
Well, it's a complex issue. It's a complex issue. I think, I was reading an article last week. The most recent data from the Chamber of Commerce says there are 9 million jobs in the United States available and only 6.5 million people that are unemployed to fix. So when we talk about unprecedented, I think we are in that situation where this is kind of the new normal and we're competing for folks to do work, right? Like I said, we're thinking outside of the box as far as some of the things that we are doing to mitigate that. But there's a couple things I think, in my opinion, are slowing that down. Number one is the issue of pay. I think that we have competition not just from municipalities. I lost 6 people to carry in the past 6 months, right? And that's not a huge pay jump, but every bit counts. You have your cost of living and cost of goods going up, something's got to give, right? I think that for jobs like IT, human resource management, solid waste services, the competition is really in the private sector for those jobs. And although we will never be able to compete with them, you see kind of this defection of, with 9 million jobs and 6.5 million people to fill them, you kind of see this fighting for those positions. I think that, our supervisors right now, and you asked a little bit about how it impacts us. Our supervisors are running at 100, Marianne's team, at 120 miles an hour trying to recruit all the time. They're either, reviewing applications on phone screens, doing interviews, following up on a background check, and it takes some time. And we're skilled labor, so that's just getting them in the door. Then we've got 3 months of training before we can even put them in a truck. It's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift, and I think that our supervisors, in addition to doing that, are carrying, the burden of the additional workload from the vacant positions.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. You said that you're doing a job fair
We are doing a job fair in June. That's
in
right.
June. Do you do one every year? Is this the first time you're doing a job fair?
This is the first time we're doing the job fair. We have not done a job fair in solid waste, but I don't know if the city maybe has. I believe the city has done a few.
We recommended that Solid Waste Services do a job fair because they have been highly successful in some of our other operational departments and a little bit quicker through the recruitment process than the traditional notification, 30-day waiting, and then going through all of the onboarding pieces once an offer is extended. So the beginning of the year, when we started looking at vacancy rates across the organization, we recommended to our operational departments that they do a job fair.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to that. I just have a quick thing. I know one of the tours that we did with Solid Waste Service, loved it. Great job. It was one of my favorite tours. But on there, you spoke about the reuse program, and I just saw that in social media. come through. Can you briefly speak to that and the exciting things that are coming for residents from your department?
The reuse program?
Yes.
The app.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. We're calling it something different, aren't we? Yeah.
The app.
No, we're totally excited with that. That's like a mini CRM where we can communicate with our customers. They can get access to recycling calendars online. You know, they can still request a printed one. I just think that robust and responsiveness to them is something that we've been waiting for, where we can just push out information, delays, and it just makes for a better customer experience. So we're super excited about it. Got stuff in there for kids to play games. We've got drop downs to say, hey, I want to recycle this. What do I do with it? Should I put it in the cart or should I take it to the convenience site? All of that, you know, it'll be tethered to our information on the web, and it will be up to date, and we can easily make those changes. So we're super excited about it.
Awesome. Great work. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate your efforts.
Councilmember Black, and then Councilmember Patton.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So one of the things that you talked about specifically when it came to recycling, and I thought it was interesting that the Northwest District, which is partially my district, had the second highest percentage of residue. And you said education is important, but then also enforceability of some things. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I think that our first way that we try to get information out to change behaviors is by communicating with our residents. And, you know, if it's, you know, like we'll lay an oops tag and say, I'm sorry, you know, we can't take this TV in the garbage, right? And we give them some opportunities to fix it. Because I'll be honest with you, when it comes to recycling, our residents have great intentions. They want to recycle a lot, too much. And, you know, it's like springtime. We're going to see a boatload of garden hoses in our processing. It's going to wrap around the gears, and it's going to shut down the recycling. But it's a great desire, but so we have to be clear. So we're really kind of streamlining our messaging throughout the region with the help of the processors. And when I talk about enforcement, we have code enforcement officers in our city that go and say, hey, you're violating this ordinance and that ordinance. I think at some point, if we continue to communicate and spend the time to educate, and we don't see it moving the needle on this, I think it should be a conversation to talk about potentially fines for contaminating or pulling up a cart if you're going to just put garbage in it, and those sort of things. So that's what I mean.
How far down the line are you thinking with that?
That's really hard to say. I think I would say that we just got this baseline, so now we kind of have an area and a starting point, and we're going to step into education and outreach mode and do that for a while and measure again, maybe next year, and see if we've made any strides on this.
Cool. The next question I have is around it's the slide on base budget and cost drivers. One of the first things listed is personnel. It says merit increases and benefit increases. I could see that, but I also find it curious, and this is going to be a question that you might not have the answer to either, because it has been specifically people who work in solid waste services who have been telling me that the biggest issue that they have is with pay, and just some big concerns around like pay. So I wanted to know if you could speak to that and like where those merit increases has been, and if those considerations around like wages specifically for the people like the man you brought up who are out picking up the trash every day, or they're out in the sewers, or they're out doing the hard dirty jobs, like where that falls into. I know we're doing a financial review within the city around wages, but the biggest concerns and complaints that I've heard around wages, and honestly talks about the possibility of striking, has been coming from the solid waste people who are in solid waste services with the city of Raleigh.
Yeah. So I've heard the same regarding pay across the city. And, you know, everybody knows public information. Durham, you know, for the past year has been protesting at council meetings in, you know, to get the attention of the leadership to do something about the pay. It's a real thing, right? Inflation is 8.2, you know, it's expensive to live here, and if we don't, you know, align those things, you're going to hear employees complain. So regarding our employees walking out, or, you know, I haven't heard that, and we've been spending a lot of time with the city manager's office to work on something that would be amenable to our employees, recognizing some of the things that are going on, recognizing inflation and the cost of goods sold. And I'm comfortable that what comes out of that, which I'm not aware of, will land in an area that I think it'll be something to build on.
What comes out of those conversations with the
Proposed budget.
As part of the budget
overall proposed
deliberations.
budget, yeah.
And you will recall, we shared on our manager's briefing a couple Thursdays ago about some of the proposed recommendations as we continue to put the FY25 proposed budget together, what some of those market adjustments we were willing to do prior to the compensation study outcome to make sure that we stayed within market competitiveness.
Okay. So one other thing that stuck out for me was around the Wilders Grove landfill open space project. You said it, but you didn't say it. Usually landfills are in lower income and Black neighborhoods. So I really like the idea of like moving this place into a new open space sort of logistically for people to enjoy. I do think, I just wanted to say, it's not like a question anymore, it's just my comments, that the steering committee should definitely include people from the community that are around there. And I think it could be something that would be really interesting for, you know, around community engagement, but I think it's really important to have like people who are directly around there kind of helping guide what's happening in their community in tandem to the people at the city. So I don't know what the process is for a steering committee. I just hope it's like centered in the lived experiences of people who are around the landfill and will now be able to participate in having an open space project. So that's pretty cool. I also want to commend you on the city organics program because that was the question I was originally going to ask about, because we hear a lot about composting. And it's great to hear that we have this feasibility study coming back this fall. Really interested to see what comes out of that, but I really enjoyed hearing about that. And that's all for me.
Thank you for the comments.
Councilmember Patton.
Yeah. Hi, Stan.
Hi.
Building on the organics, just want to say Northeast Raleigh had the lowest contamination of anywhere in the city. So if you need an area of the city to run the pilot, we've shown ourselves to be good stewards of the solid waste program. So
Do you go by your neighbors and pick out the recyclables? And
yeah, definitely. I definitely do. Yeah. No wishful recycling happening in Northeast Raleigh. You just carry that right onto the convenience center. So there's that. Also on the slide with the contamination, the central business district being 100% landfilled is heartbreaking. And truly, I think, you know, unacceptable, not directed at your staff in any way, but directed at residents, at all of us who are throwing things away improperly to the point where they're so contaminated they cannot be recycled. Obviously, we can't move from 100% to 19.1% in a single year, but what is a goal that you have for contaminate? Well, one, how often will you reassess the contamination levels?
So, the central business district is small, but there's a lot going on. Let me start with talking about what we're doing right now. We've been working a lot with DRA. We're piloting a new program where it's a centralized location. The biggest problem sometimes is cardboard and recycling. You put, like Jesse had in his cart there, you put 2 of those in there, all the space is gone. Now you run out of recycling carts, the recyclables are going in garbage. And so they just get intermingled all the time. So I don't think people are kind of doing it intentionally to bad recycles. I think the model downtown is a residential model and should be commercial. Now, that's down the road somewhere, but I just want to say that out loud. I've been through a lot of municipalities, and what we really need to do is have the experts come in here and say, how do we customize solid waste and recycling so we can get all this stuff off the curb and make our downtown more welcoming? So that's part of it. I think the other thing that we're doing is Michael Moore is heading up a Rethink Downtown initiative, and DRA participates in that. Evan Raleigh is part of that as well. And we're just brainstorming on a lot of things, not just solid waste, but a lot of things downtown. And so for right now, what we're going to do is every month I send those guys to the processor to see if they're going to reject the load and have to take it to the landfill. And so we're giving the education and outreach an opportunity to bear some fruit, and then we'll make some more decisions from there.
Gotcha.
Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Thanks for that. I'm glad there's work being done, because truly heartbreaking. Staying with downtown, I also rode along with Jesse. He's a national treasure, but I do think there are people who are perhaps not maliciously, but willfully putting dangerous and incorrect items in their bins. So it is a dangerous job that the operators have. And I'm curious if you can speak to the rate of safety incidents and other things you might be doing to enhance their safety. Because even as I watch the operators work really hard to be safe and to keep me safe, there were still light bulbs getting smashed into the machine and then spewing. I mean, it was a dangerous environment, and also there's traffic happening on the other side of the vehicle. So just more of a broad question around safety.
Yeah, I think solid waste services is listed in the top 5 most dangerous jobs in the country. And, you know, training, focus. I want them to focus on the work and the customers and their safety. You know, that's why we try to resolve all the other things for them, so they don't have to worry about their rent or their gas payment or what have you. There's lots of hazards in there, everything from needles to, you know, chemicals, and
Human
you know,
waste.
we've had a significant amount of injuries, and then there's the accidents because we're driving these large trucks in rush hour traffic. You lose your focus for 1 second. That's all it takes is 1 second. So I can certainly bring you back some more detailed statistics of what we've seen year over year. And we constantly try to do better with safety, even taking a day down just to focus on safety. We have a new training program that have come up. We're hiring driver trainers so that if somebody has an accident, we can put them with the driver trainer and do some remedial training. A lot of our accidents are backing, you know, and if you've got a camera in that truck, and you got spotters in that truck, and you got mirrors on that truck, you know, that's a lot of tools to keep you from backing into something, but yet we backed into stuff. So
Yeah, if you're able to send
Yeah.
some information to the
we'll put
managers
something in the
update,
city manager's report.
that'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
And then I also I have a couple more thoughts. Thinking about Jesse, I was wondering if y'all, or how the partnership with the Great Raleigh Cleanup is going. Have you been doing you've been partnering with them, is that right?
Yeah, you know, I think Megan Anderson is kind of spearheading that.
Okay.
I do think that there are departments that are contributing. I know we are,
Yeah.
not just with advice, but also financially, if we can, to keep that going. But Megan Anderson is running point on it, and she could probably share a little bit more. I can certainly reach out to her on that.
Yeah. I think she's back here. I'll find.
Megan, you want?
It's okay. Oh, no, she's coming down.
Just as a gentle reminder, we have 3 other items
Oh,
on today's agenda, so.
Okay,
and
sorry.
This one has already taken almost an hour, so just. be
okay.
mindful
My
of that.
apologies.
We can get Megan to get a report to you.
Yeah,
Hey.
sorry, I didn't mean to call you all the way down.
No problem at all. I'll just say we're really excited. We've got a ton of departments. I could name off probably more than 5 that we're talking to on a regular basis, and we are working with Preston on that. And so we will be coming back to the team to share about that shortly. So really excited about it, and definitely going to be a really good program.
Awesome. Sorry, just one more. I just wanted, and it's not, and this might be a longer conversation, so if we need to put a pin in it, that's fine. But on balance with making sure our employees can afford to work here, I also always want to be mindful of how our user fees impact our residents who live here. And the chart that shows what the fee increases will look like as we switch to fully enterprise looks to be outpacing a regular rate of inflation, which concerns me a little bit for our residents' affordability. I guess maybe my question is just like, maybe speak a little bit to why getting over that hump is going, what's the benefit to our residents for continuing to climb and hopefully after that stabilizing? What's the benefit to transitioning to fully enterprise?
Yeah, so I think the benefits are that, you know, transitioning to full enterprise frees up the general fund money that has been subsidizing for city initiatives, and so they get that back in some way or the other. I think that the cost for a CIP, we have to do that because, you know, Councilor Branch talking about trucks and technology and infrastructure. If we get more CNG trucks, we're going to have to build a CNG maintenance facility to maintain those trucks because of the explosibility and those sort of things. Then we talk about organics and curbside. We need that infrastructure, you know, revamping. I think the last quote we got on the yard waste center phased approach to be able to accommodate food waste is about $25 million to get everything going. So the CIP starts tucking away that money for those long infrastructure gains so we can maintain our services. Did I get it all? Sort of. No?
Yeah.
Oh, and if you do look at the chart, you'll see that it has been going up in that area for a while since 2016. It's just that we're leveling it out. You know, whether it's 11% in 21 or 5% in 18, you know, as costs increase, so likely will fees.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Stan. Entertaining as always. All right, next we have the agency grant recommendations. Sadia?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Sadia Sattar from Budget and Management Services. I would be remiss to say that this is our last budget work session before the manager proposes her budget with you all, to you all next month. So as the manager mentioned, this is another jam-packed session for you all. So I will be talking about agency grants. We also have representatives from the Raleigh Arts Commission as well as staff from Housing and Neighborhoods to chat with you all about the community enhancement grants piece here in the city. And then we also have budget staff here today to talk to you all about the capital improvement program for next year, as well as our fees, proposed fees for the upcoming fiscal year as well. So I know that we have about an hour left left, so I'm going to try to rally through and give you as much information as possible. As I start my presentation, I would please recommend that you hold off your questions till the end so that we have opportunity for the commissions to come and speak to you all this afternoon. So as I said, I'm going to kick off and talk to you all about the City of Raleigh's grants program here, and trying to pay some extra TLC here on the competitive grants that we hand out as part of the city's grants process, and also give you all a little information about the historically funded agencies that we provide funding to as well here in the city. Then, like I said, we have representative from the Raleigh Arts Commission here that'll speak to you. Staff from Housing and Neighborhoods will speak to you as well. And then I'll round off this conversation by chatting with you all about some next steps about the grants process. We've had some rumblings, dare I say, some questions from City Council and prior council meetings about, the program. So we just kind of wanted to, pay heed to your questions a little bit here. So as I mentioned, we have some competitive grants that we hand out in the city, as well as some historically funded organizations. So I'll kick us off with talking about our competitive grants program. As you can see, our competitive grants program is divided into 3 buckets. We have our arts bucket, which is the official vehicle for our municipal support to the city's arts organizations. And then we also have community enhancement grants, which count against the city's CDBG, public service category here. And then we also have our human services bucket, which is really dedicated to nonprofits around the city that provide services to 5 targeted groups. And those include the elderly, those include youth here in the city, folks that are unsheltered, substance users, as well as folks that have disabilities. And then again, we also have some policies that kind of guide this competitive grant process. An agency asking for funding can get funding in 2 of the 3 categories, not all 3. If they are requesting $25,000 or more in grant funding, then we ask that they provide an audit, which is then reviewed by our folks in the finance department. And any time an agency is asking for funding, we ask that the maximum level of funding requested kind of must be about 25% of their operating expenses for the prior fiscal year. So with that in mind, we also kind of wanted to share with City Council sort of where the money comes from and how it is evaluated and what is that methodology for growing this pot of funding for the city. So as you can see with the arts and with the human services piece, that source of funding is the general fund. For the community enhancement grants, it is CDBG, or the Community Development Block Grant. Who evaluates those grants, who gives those out? For the arts, it's the Raleigh Arts Commission, whom you'll be hearing from here shortly. For community enhancement, you'll be hearing from our Housing and Neighborhood departments shortly. And for human services, it's the Human Relations Commission that divvies up those grants and awards them on an annual basis. And what's the growth? How do we determine what that pot of funds looks like? Well, for arts, it's $5 per capita, so that's the population of the city. We'd look up the census.gov website on an annual basis. So it's the population of the city multiplied by 5. So that gives us that pot of money for them. For community enhancements, it's capped at $200,000 per statutory requirements. And then for human services, it's a 10% increase over the prior fiscal year. And this was a policy that the City Council, prior to you all, adopted as part of the fiscal year 23 adopted budget. So now that we've spoken about our competitive grants, let's talk a little bit about our direct allocations, grant allocations, or those agencies that we have historically funded as part of the city's budget process. So I know that I have arts residence companies written here, but these are actually agencies that we are managed by or have contractual agreements with our Parks and Recreation Department. And then, of course, there are agencies that receive direct funding as well as parts of the arts process that have to do with human services. So those 5 agencies on the human services side, I'm sure you've heard their names. We've got CASA, Healing Transitions, Interfaith, Legal Aid of North Carolina, to name a few. And on the art side, we have 4 agencies, and those are the Carolina Ballet, North Carolina Symphony, Raleigh Little Theater, as well as Theater in the Park. So just to kind of apprise you all. Where it gets a little tricky is that there actually has been no historical methodology to grow funding. It's sort of, just kind of what it is. So this is what we're going to talk about in next steps as to how to figure this out. And I do want to share with City Council that last year we actually added another agency to the Human Services Direct Allocation pot, and that was Wake Legal Support Center, if you all recall. We added $50,000 for them as part of the budget process last year as well. So how do the direct allocations work for these two? So again, the source of funding is the general fund. These are historical allocations. They've been around for a long, long time. So they do get funded as part of the process. And how they grow differs. You know, the pot either stays the same, or if City Council decides to award them an organization additional funds like you did last year, that's how that pot grows as well. So here's a little, I've got two further graphs to show you that show you how our competitive grants have grown in the city. So if you look at arts, you see how they have grown steadily since fiscal year 19. And if you see the human services grants funding, you'll see that that pot has also grown steadily. And again, community enhancement is not here because if you recall, that pot sort of stays the same at $200,000. And then here are direct grant allocations funding. As you can see, the residence companies for arts were pretty flat. And then again, they got a bump last year and are going to stay the same for this upcoming fiscal year. And then the human services direct allocations, pretty much the same or up and down. And we have a slight bump in 24 because council did fund another organization. And then it's growing again as part of fiscal year 25. So what is the proposed funding for the City of Raleigh's grants program for the upcoming fiscal year? It is anticipated to be about $4.29 million. If you recall, if you look at our human service grants and if you look at our arts grant funding, this does not include the CDBG piece because of course it's $200,000. About $3.1-ish million is going towards both arts grants as well as human service grants in the City of Raleigh. And then again, we have about 1.1 going towards those direct allocations or those historically funded agencies. So you can see about $588,000 is going to those 4 arts agencies that we have contractual agreements with, and then human services gets about $564,000 next year, just like it did last year. So with that, I know I've thrown a lot at you. I am going to now ask for representatives from the Raleigh Arts Commission to come to the podium and speak to the grants for fiscal year 25.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Clegg. I'm chairman of the Arts Commission for the City of Raleigh. It's always exciting to come and talk to you about what the City of Raleigh does in the arts, what you do and the way you do it and the focus with which you insist it be done makes what Raleigh does premier in this country. Because what so many communities, perhaps the same size as Raleigh, will talk about, oh, we have such a vibrant, wonderful arts community, and basically what they do is they have an airport and they send them in on a plane and they put them on the plane and they leave. We don't do that. We grow the arts community in Raleigh, and we have done that in a systematic way that, importantly, allows these groups to be part of arts leadership in a diverse opportunity environment. And what we focus on is not just professional arts. We are concerned about grassroots art because great art comes from the grassroots. Untested, untried deserves that opportunity, and we do provide it. We also celebrate the amateur because so much talent exists in this community in an amateur way and uses a bevy of talents in other areas in this community, but also has a performing art. And of course, we're all so pleased with the professional that we see growing. And just had the opportunity on Saturday night to go to the opera gala. we have reached that critical mass in population in the city of Raleigh and in Wake County to really have developed an audience for opera. And to watch that evolve is just fascinating. The most important thing about the grants program is the public-private partnership. And one aspect of what you do in these arts grants that I don't think gets talked about enough is the fact that these funds are highly, highly leveraged. You are not funding anybody into existence in these grants. You are providing pieces for their prosperity. And you're also providing an incredible asset in leverage, because that leverage, that funding, can be used in making appeals to corporate donors, to foundational donors, and to other specific grant donors. Those private sector groups want to see a public sector commitment to the arts and a public sector commitment to that specific group. Of course, been here before over the year talking to you about the ARPA grants and what the city has done with that. One of those issues that we have looked at is a leadership vacuum in arts groups in the city coming off of the pandemic. You have lots of incredibly talented, incredibly well-meaning, incredibly directed folks running arts agencies right now, but the one thing they haven't done is administratively directed an arts agency. And just like everything else in the world, it's not as easy as it looks, and it takes a very specific set of skills, which we try very hard to mentor within the grants process. And the grants process this year has clearly shown us that there is a significant need for further mentorship and further education and support for those in first-time positions of arts management in the city. And that organizational issue, that destabilization of the changes in leadership, it recognizes that that does change. Also, we're in a growing community where the aspects of arts agencies are becoming incredibly more complex. We've talked to you in the past about venues for emerging artists, and where every square foot is being taken up by growth, it's sometimes difficult to find those. Management experience, layoffs, turnovers, all are important, but the three things that are absolutely critical, I think, to remember in looking at these grants is, number one, that the leadership vacuum is real. And we need to be addressing that, and we need to be supportive of these agencies. The second is that these funds are so incredibly important for leverage, that we are looking at art in all of its recommendations, and that in the list you see before you today, you see new folks. And you see folks who have been here a while but didn't feel comfortable making the application. And the Gifted Arts is one of those, been around for a decade, loved what they did, never could have them be an applicant. Starting in December, this process that you see full before you tonight began in December. And it began in December with a series of educational opportunities for folks who have never done or didn't feel comfortable to come in a completely open environment, that we weren't going to hold you to anything, ask anything. Let's see how this works. It resulted in your new applicants. And that is so important. And then, of course, we got into the actual rubric of making each of these applicants have the opportunity to share with us, 3 arts commissioners, and 12 community representatives, all who were very specifically selected because of their backgrounds in nonprofit management, finance, engagement, or a specific knowledge of artistic discipline. Had the opportunity to speak to every applicant and really explore what their goals were. We evaluated each of these groups on artistic merit, on management, financial accountability, organizational stability, and most importantly to me, was engagement with the community. Tony Gadsden is a multi-year chairman of the Grants Committee for the Arts Commission, and her attention to detail and devotion to this process has been remarkable. And so as you look across these 1.8 million, you are changing the landscape of arts in Raleigh. You're expanding the landscape of arts in Raleigh. You're celebrating the history of it, but you're also clearly in a direction towards change and a very energetic approach to new expressions of art in this city. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Good job on that
You're always
application.
thorough.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we'll have staff from staff from Housing and Neighborhoods.
Good evening, I'm John Niffneger with Housing and Neighborhoods. I'm going to be presenting on the Community Enhancement Grant. As Sadia mentioned earlier, the Community Enhancement Grant is funded with federal Community Development Block Grant dollars. It awards funding through a competitive process to nonprofits providing public services to low and moderate income residents. As in previous years, the RFP was issued in the late fall and applications were due in December. A panel of staff from Housing and Neighborhoods reviewed and scored each of the applications, with the final recommendations being presented to you all this evening during your budget work session. And this year we had 4 agencies recommended for funding, including Urban Ministries and their Helen Wright Center for Women, Healing Transitions and their Emergency Men's Drop-In Shelter, the Hope Center at Poland and their expanding housing support for former foster youth, and the Boys and Girls Club serving Wake County and their project Great Futures. The combined amount of residents served through these 4 programs will be over 2,400. That concludes my portion of the presentation. Any questions?
Councilmember Branch?
Just one question. The 200,000 that's statutory, is that a minimum or a maximum, or is that just like?
Yes, so to give you a little bit of context, this current year the city is receiving, where is the amount? A little over 2.8 million in Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. Of that total amount, we are allowed to allocate 15% to go towards public services. The Community Enhancement Grant Program falls under that public services category. Also under the public services category, we have funding going to Wake County South Wilmington Street Emergency Men's Shelter, funding to support our drop-in White Flag Shelter and home buyer counseling. So that 200,000 that we have is pretty much the remainder of our public services maxing out on CDBG, and that is a federal requirement.
Okay, so I guess we need more money from the federal government.
I can say that I know some of the advocacy groups have been advocating to get that public services cap increased, but I don't know when or if that will ever happen.
Just last follow-up. Have we ever made a request to the federal government for the increase?
The city has signed on to the National Community Development Association as part of that ask.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Black?
So I think it's interesting because I'm seeing some things in the community engagement grants that are also under the human services grants. So are the organizations, like some of them listed, are they like, is there a rule about applying for the community enhancement grant versus the human services grant? Do we like cap some things when it comes to these things? And I guess really the question is about like, what percentage do legacy organizations take up the granting process, and is there space for like new organizations to be able to come in and possibly receive grant funding from the city? And is there like a certain percentage that we're shooting for with like new groups a year? And I
So
don't
I
know who
can
could answer
speak-
that question. That might be a Sadia question.
I can speak to the Community Enhancement Grant Program. I know that is one of the 3 grants programs that Sadia mentioned. An agency can only apply and receive funding from 2 of those 3 categories. So it is possible that an agency could apply to get community enhancement grant funding as well as human services, and if they scored well, could receive funding from both categories. I don't know.
Before I answer your question, because I thought that that would come up, let's just chat a little bit about next steps, because I think if there's one thing we can all agree on is that we do need to revamp the grants program in the city, and that's what we intend to do. We're going to look at this in the short term. What can we do this upcoming fiscal year? So our intention is to hire a grants program manager. If you all recall, we've had Kirsten Larson in our office, and God, do I miss her, who was overseeing grants for over how many years? Over 20 or so years that she was in budget. So there was a lot of historical knowledge which she took with her when she left and moved to housing and neighborhoods. But again, as it created a void in this space, we realize now that we need somebody with a pretty intense skill set to manage not only the grants that the city gives out, which is what we're talking about today, but also the ones that we receive in terms of compliance, in terms of what is our policy, what is our strategy moving forward. So that's what we intend to do in the upcoming fiscal year. Where the rubber is really going to hit the road in fiscal year 26, and that'll answer a lot of your questions right now, Councilmember Black. We intend to create a dedicated grants program so that we can provide more opportunities to new folks that are, there's a ton of organizations here in the city. So really kind of create a grants program that really operates towards not just looking at the folks that we have funded so far, but provide available funding for new grantees as well to build capacity, to build competitiveness. I know Councilmember Branch, you've talked about a step down, so that's what we intend to look at as well. And again, something that we are really considering as part of the process is really consolidating the competitive as well as those legacy organization funding pots. So we understand that, there's some inequity there to make the entire pot competitive as well. And then again, if you remember from the slide that I showed, we have different ways of funding our grants at the moment. One, arts is per capita, human services kind of doing its own thing, and of course CDBG is special. So should we standardize it and kind of look at it all, through one lens? So that's something that we're going to be looking at. So I think it's really important for us to really stand up a process here. And so we intend to start hiring for this role once I'm done with budget. So hopefully, knock on wood, beginning of May, when I can actually dedicate some time to that, because we really need to ensure that these new processes are in place for the fall. Because in fall of this year, we're going to start talking about fiscal year 26. So we really want to make sure that the Arts Commission, the Human Relations Commission, has some new ground rules to work with moving forward. So long about answer to your question, Councilmember Black, but I sincerely, I understand where you're coming from, because we've identified, and this is a question that Councilmember Branch, you also had last year about these historical organizations, and whereas this competitive grant funding pot and how there are so many, this imbalance, dare I say. So if that actually concludes, I know I've just kind of thrown a lot of information at you all, but this is the end of my presentation, and I'd be open to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councilmember Fort?
I know we had a pot of money to do technical assistance for some of these. Is that a part of this process, or is it a separate process, or how did it all work out?
So you will recall during the pandemic, we took a portion of our ARPA allocation to do some technical assistance, capacity building for some organizations who otherwise probably would not fare very well through the competitive process. We kind of tracked some of those organizations and helped them to get ready so that they can compete in the competitive pool now. So many of those organizations have sort of kind of gotten themselves in a good position. Not all, but some are. So as we revamp the program, the entire grants process, we will have a component of technical assistance and capacity building and education, just so that we're not continuing to fund the same organizations year after year after year, although they're still doing good work. There are other agencies, and I raised that point about 4 years ago, like it's really hard for a new organization to get in our process. So that's why we're gonna do a complete overhaul of the review process. Good question.
I know other places, they will limit the number of years you can get funding, sometimes like 3 years, and then you've got to take a break. And then others leaves it open for others, so we might want to investigate some of those models and look at that as well. Okay, any other questions?
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Okay, next we have the capital improvement program update.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, and the City Manager. I am Hannah Osborne, the Capital Programs Analyst in the Department of Management and Budget Services. This evening, I will present a portion of the City Manager's proposed capital improvement program. Here is today's agenda. First, I will speak generally on capital budgeting, including what defines a capital project, and financing options, and the rationale. Then I will walk through Raleigh's capital budget process and present the pay-go portion of the proposed 5-year capital improvement program, which I'll refer to as CIP. A capital budget is a legal document adopted by ordinance that contains funding sources and appropriations for capital assets that exceed a selected financial amount known as a capital budget threshold. The City of Raleigh's capital threshold is $25,000. A capital asset is a tangible or intangible item with a useful life that extends beyond a single reporting period. In North Carolina, a single reporting period is July 1 to June 30th. A fire station is an example of a tangible capital asset, and software is an example of an intangible capital asset. Capital funding can be classified into two broad types: debt financing and cash or pay-as-you-go, or I'll be referring to it as pay-go. The city uses a range of debt mechanisms. General obligation bonds are approved through ballot initiatives and are backed by the taxing power of the city. Typically, parks and recreation facilities and major transportation projects are funded through GO bonds. Limited obligation bonds are issued on the available debt capacity of the city and are generally used for capital construction of facilities like fire stations, or to fund water and sewer infrastructure projects. Pay-go sources include transfers from the city's general fund, fees, and program revenue. Unless otherwise designated by council, general fund transfers can be applied to any project. Certain fees may only be spent on eligible projects. The largest funding source for the CIP is debt. When you issue debt for a project, current and future users are paying for the project. Debt financing represents a long-term financial commitment which has a lasting policy impact. For example, the park bonds projects are primarily debt financed. These projects take years to complete, and when complete, will serve and benefit both current and future Raleigh residents. Other projects, which are reasonably accomplished in one fiscal year and have an immediate annual benefit to the public, are primarily funded through pay-go financing. For example, planned bridge repairs. Although these will benefit future residents, there is an immediate need to deliver on these projects annually. Therefore, bridge repairs are best suited for PAYCO financing. On the previous slide, I mentioned that limited obligation bonds are issued based on debt capacity. Another reason to use PAYCO financing for specific projects is that it preserves debt capacity for much larger capital projects. In October, the city kicked off the capital budget process. From October to early December, departments identified capital needs for fiscal years 2025 through 2029. Departments submitted over 120 capital requests, averaging $120 million per year of the CIP. The count does not include funded capital elements, which are capital elements that have specific revenue sources, like user fees. In step 2, from December to February, staff evaluated unfunded requests and presented prioritized requests to the city manager. Next, our department worked with the finance department to identify the most appropriate financing, debt or PAYCO, for the requested unfunded projects. This process also involved reviewing departments' available capital budgets from prior years. As mentioned, we received over 120 unfunded capital requests. During this third phase of the process, Budget and Finance identified existing funding for nearly 20 projects. For example, the fire department requested funding for fire station maintenance. In 2020, the city issued limited obligation bonds for public safety facilities. There are remaining balances on those bonds, and so in FY25, those fire station maintenance will actually be funded through the residuals on those bonds. Today, I am presenting the PAYGO portion of the city's capital budget, but you have already heard from some capital elements, and you will hear more when the budget is presented on May 21st. Here is a summary list of Raleigh's capital budget elements. In prior meetings, you have heard from several enterprise funds. Enterprise funds account for operations that are financed in a manner similar to private businesses. Enterprise elements include the Convention Center and Performing Arts Center, parking, transit, Raleigh Water, soon-to-be solid waste services, and stormwater. The last 3 elements listed have a dedicated funding source for specific uses of affordable housing, street resurfacing, and parks maintenance, respectively. The 5-year CIP serves as a policy document that becomes a statement of city plans regarding timing, location, and funding of capital investments. Although the CIP is presented and planned for 5 years, Council adopts an annual spending plan. Therefore, today's presentation focuses on FY25 and exclusively on PAYGO finance projects. Per the Wake County revaluation, the 1-cent equivalent of property tax rate has increased from $7.9 million to $11.4 million. As previously approved by Council, there are 3 capital elements with a dedicated transfer from the general fund. This policy decision commits funding for affordable housing, street resurfacing, and parks maintenance. That said, these transfers are narrow in use. At this time, there is not an unrestricted dedicated general fund transfer for PAYCO projects. I will note that before COVID-19 pandemic, there was annual general fund transfers to the capital budget for areas like building maintenance and technology. Due to the uncertainty of revenue during the pandemic, these annual transfers were discontinued. Starting in FY 2025, the city manager proposes the inclusion of a dedicated general fund transfer for projects best suited for PAYGO funding. With known dedicated PAYGO source, the city can strategically build out a 5-year PAYGO CIP that plans for known larger costs. In addition, this approach commits funding for external-facing programs like the Building Upfit Grant. Another benefit of this approach is it allows departments to plan for project delivery. A benefit of a dedicated penny for PAYGO is it allows the city to develop a strategic plan, 5-year CIP, that builds out the budget with an anticipated 2% annual increase. On the next slides, I will share the PAYGO projects included in the proposed budget. For today's presentation, I have grouped the PAYGO projects into 5 categories: external-facing projects, technology, city facilities, other, and transportation. The FY 2025 proposed budget affirms support for external-facing programs. Unlike the competitive grants program, which Sadia just presented on, these grants are in the capital budget because the nature of these projects extends beyond one fiscal year. For example, the city's building upfit grant commits awards in one fiscal year, but by policy, those awards are not granted until the project is complete. And often the project's completion is in the next fiscal year. Similar to the building upfit grant, the facade improvement grant matches up to 50% of qualified construction to improve the exterior appearance of commercial buildings. The impact grant partner grant supports underrepresented innovators through 6 larger grants and up to 3 micro grants. The Public Project Community Support Fund helps address impacts to residents and businesses resulting from qualified, large-scale capital projects like bus rapid transit. On the next several slides, some projects will not have an amount listed in that FY25 proposed column, but they will have an amount in the total column. These projects are known needs with budget planned in future fiscal years. In the technology category, the first 2 capital projects are contracts that renew every 3 to 5 years. Therefore, there is not a need in FY25. And just to note that these 2 projects are both in the Emergency Communication Center department. The city's Enterprise Resource Planning and Human Capital Management System, PeopleSoft, is approaching its end of life. This project, the 3rd one listed here, funds a consultant to assess city needs, identify gaps, and recommend an implementation plan for a new system. For FY26 through FY29, funding for one-time system improvements is also included. In the city facility category, several projects do not have funding proposed in FY25. This is because departments identified specific project needs in future fiscal years based on anticipated end-of-life cycle or needs to maintain a state of good repair. The Building Systems Improvement Project has planned funding needs in all 5 fiscal years of the CIP. This project maintains, upgrades, and replaces tangible capital assets to ensure compliance and enhance the health and safety of employees. FY25 includes funding for HVAC replacements. The next 3 projects requested by Engineering Services do not require funding in FY25. Between FY26 and FY25 and FY26, $1.9 million is programmed for police station generators and $500,000 for security at police headquarters. The last project listed here is for public safety land acquisition. This funding allows the city to act on properties as they become available to avoid delays and additional costs during the public safety facility development. As mentioned, a large benefit of having a dedicated transfer from the general fund is that it allows the city to plan. Funding for public safety land acquisition is planned for FY28. Having that known need allows us to prioritize other PAYGO projects in FY27 and FY29. The 5-year CIP also provides a reoccurring annual allocation for the Department of Planning and Development's Civic Places program. This city-led program integrates placemaking elements in public infrastructure projects, prioritizing projects in the city's adopted plans. In the Office of Strategy and Innovation, the FY25 proposed budget includes one-time funding for community engagement and a consultant to develop the strategic plan. Our current strategic plan ends at the end of FY25. The penny for PAYGO also includes funding for 4 transportation projects in '25. Vision Zero enhancement adds crosswalks and other safety improvements for ADA compliance, which is required by law when street resurfacing. Neighborhood traffic management program installs traffic calming measures along streets where there is habitual speed compliance issues or consistent crash patterns. FY25 funding aligns with the construction season and funds 20 projects across all council districts and neighborhood demographics. Major bridge repairs are for large overhauls that extend the useful life of the bridge. Accessible pedestrian signals provide audible indications for pedestrians with vision impairments. The budget includes funding for 25 locations per year to meet ADA requirements and reduce risk. In addition to FY 2025 funding, there are 5 additional transportation projects with planned funding between FY 26 and FY 29. First, federally mandated bridge inspections are contracted every 2 years and are required by law. Therefore, funding is provided in FY 26 and FY 28. Minor bridge repairs are for needs discovered through those inspections to maintain a state of good repair. The Neighborhood Bikeways Program funds projects identified in the 2016 Bike Plan priority list. Projects identified for FY26 are in Southeast Raleigh and provide critical connections, including a safe route for cycling into downtown. In FY26, PAYGO funding is provided to address sidewalk trip hazards. Starting in FY26, annual funding is planned for 1 traffic signal installation per year. Before I move on to the next section, I wanted to return to the summary PAYGO funding slide. I want to restate that the 5-year CIP represents the city's best judgment at the time. Future needs may result in some programmatic changes in the out years of the CIP. Earlier, I presented on different capital financing sources. In addition to a dedicated transfer from the general fund, one-time revenue can be used for PAYGO projects. The city's revenue from interest income is doing exceptionally well. Although it is doing well, interest revenue's performance is more variable than other revenue sources like property tax. Because of the uncertain performance of interest revenue, it is financially prudent to program revenue towards one-time projects rather than ongoing needs. If we program this revenue for ongoing needs and the interest revenue returns to normal performance, the city would need to make up for that gap in revenue with the property tax rate. Therefore, the proposed budget programs this revenue for one-time and pilot projects. This slide summarizes the city's responsible approach to program this revenue for one-time needs. This includes funding for restructuring the city's website, median barrier safety equipment for special events, and electrical vehicle supply equipment. In the Office of Sustainability, funding is provided for the installation of solar panels on city-owned facilities. This project aims to take advantage of the Federal Inflation Reduction Act's solar tax credit program. In the technology category, one-time funding is provided to update equipment needed for hybrid meetings, our fiber network, and software enhancements in several departments. In the transportation category, funding is provided for one-time studies, a pilot program to expedite project delivery, and sidewalk repairs. As you may recall, connectivity to parks and greenways was the top project identified through the city's participatory budgeting survey. Therefore, the proposed budget leverages an additional $1 million to bolster the budget for sidewalk microgaps. The Departments of Transportation and Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources have worked together to identify a microgap in each district. This map visually displays those locations. In District A, a sidewalk microgap creates a connection to East Fork Mine Creek Trail. In District B, a sidewalk will connect to Sims Branch Trail. In District C, a sidewalk will connect access to Little Rock Trail. District D will add a sidewalk connection to Method Park. And in District E, a sidewalk microgap will create a connection to Reedy Creek Trail. The Department of Management and Budget Services will return on May 21 to present the city manager's operating budget and the complete FY25 through FY29 CIP. A representative from each department that has a capital request included in the proposed budget is in the gallery today. And at this time, I would like to open the floor to questions.
Any questions? Staff? Councilmember Patton?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Can you go to the slide that had the land acquisition for public safety? Perfect, awesome. I just wanted to confirm my own understanding of the slide. That $5 million is for the total amount for those out years, so like
Correct.
and a quarter million
And
each.
it's all actually in FY28.
Oh,
And it's
all-
timed with, so today I presented the pay-go budget. There's also then the debt-funded and finance projects. And so the timing of this land acquisition is based on timing for going out and constructing those fire facilities or public safety facilities.
Okay, so there's debt available in the early years. That's just a long time before we start acquiring land.
And I can't recall the exact amount, but I know that in the FY24 budget, we also programmed in monies for public safety land acquisition, and there should be an item coming forward soon with one of those. 10 million. We've programmed 10 million.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. And I just want to make mention too that Councilmember Melton is absent and excused today, and Councilmember Harrison had to leave, so she is now absent and excused as well as of 5:30. Thank you. Next, we have our City of Raleigh proposed fee schedule for 2025.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Madam Mayor, members of City Council, and Madam City Manager. My name is Jared Johnson. I'm a Senior Budget and Engagement Analyst in the Department of Budget and Management Services. And today I'm here to talk about the FY25 fee schedule. So first I'll speak generally about what the fee schedule is, why certain changes are made, and then I'll highlight a few notable changes to the FY25 fee schedule. So the City of Raleigh publishes a fee schedule, and that is a comprehensive list of fees that the city charges for services. One good example of that is water service. So a common reason to charge a fee is cost recovery. So by this example, Raleigh Water would charge a fee to its customers to recover its costs for providing water service. Publishing this fee schedule helps provide a higher level of transparency with the public and establishes a single source of information for fee information. Every year, Budget Management Services presents the fee schedule and highlights changes from the previous year's fee schedule. The fee schedule is adopted with the annual operating budget ordinance. So sometime in June, you will be adopting the FY25 budget and the fee schedule together. So now we'll talk about changes to the fee schedule. So I'll start by saying that a lot of our fees have not changed. Some fees have changed for a variety of reasons, but a common reason for fees to change is inflation. So fees that are inflation adjusted are set to increase by certain indices. A common one is the Consumer Price Index, and that is a measure that more of us are familiar with as it is a common measure for inflation. And so that is based on the average cost increases to a basket of goods over the last 12 months. So for FY25, fees that are set to increase by CPI will increase by 3.4%. Then we also have ENR, which is the Engineering News Reports Construction Cost Index, and that is based on the average annual inflation rate of construction materials and labor. So fees that increase by ENR, they're set to increase by ENR, will increase by 2.7% in FY25. So for FY25, you've already heard about fee changes from these three enterprise departments. So the rest of the presentation will focus instead on other departments' changes. So rather than going through the fee schedule line by line and talking about every single change, today I'm just going to highlight a few noteworthy changes that have impacts to the community. So Raleigh Fire wants to add a new fee for open flames and candles of $50 per establishment for flames or candles used with assembly areas, dining areas of restaurants, or drinking establishments. Raleigh Fire would also like to add a new fee for follow-up inspections for explosives permits. The existing explosives permit allows blasting for 60 days and covers the fire marshal's initial inspection. If any additional inspection is needed within that permit period, the new fee of $50 per hour would help offset the fire marshal's costs for conducting those follow-up inspections of existing blasting permits. And speaking of permits, the Office of Special Events is proposing a new nightlife permit to replace the amplified entertainment permit and the hospitality district entertainment permit. So per the new ordinance for safe operations, the nightlife permit is required of establishments with certain assembly types, amplified sound after 11 p.m., and the consumption of alcohol. This nightlife permit has an initial cost of $500 per permit. After the first year of that initial permit, it costs only $100 per year to renew the permit. The Office of Special Events is also seeking to reinstate the streetery permit. For those not familiar, a streetery is an on-street outdoor dining establishment that is occupying the public right-of-way. This permit was previously waived for 4 years during the pandemic, and staff now wish to resume the permit at 50% of the pre-pandemic rate, which was $3,000 per permit. So for FY25, the streeter permit would be $1,500 per permit. Up next, we have the Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Complex with some proposed increase to certain rates. So staff conducted a market study and determined that the convention center's maximum rental rates are below market compared to peer cities. To catch back up, the department is proposing to increase their maximum rate they can charge by 5% for the next 5 fiscal years. For context, the maximum rate is rarely charged as the rental rates may vary from agreement to agreement. The Performing Arts Center would like to introduce a special rate for corporate-type, non-ticketed events at Memorial, Maimandi, and Fletcher to assist with cost recovery. Tickets are a good source of revenue, so when tickets are not sold for these certain kinds of events, adding this rate kind of helps smooth out the revenues between these different events to consistently cover costs. For the last set of fees we'd like to highlight for you today, we have Raleigh Transportation with a proposed traffic analysis review fee. So it's important to note that not all developments would trigger this new fee. Only those with a specified level of intensity impact per the Unified Development Ordinance would be subjecting to submit a traffic impact analysis for review. And only then would they be charged the $2,500 per study fee. And any addendum review would cost only $1,000 per follow-up study. So next steps. Today, staff is requesting that council provide any feedback on the proposed fee schedule and any of the fees that we highlighted. And with that, that concludes my presentation. As a reminder, all these fees will be included with the city manager's proposed FY25 operating budget on May 21st. And council will be asked to adopt the fees with that operating budget ordinance in June. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Councilmember Black and then Jones.
The only question I have is about the traffic analysis review. How much does it cost now?
That is a great question, and I think I'll have to defer to my friends in transportation.
Good evening, Kenneth Ritchie with Transportation. So traditionally, we've had staff internally that have done those reviews. Given some of the market challenges we've got, we're actually having to look at contracting those services out. And so that $2,500 actually equates to about 50% of what the value or the estimate we've gotten from our consultant for that review.
So with the consultant, it's $5,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
Sorry. Can I ask a follow-up question then? What, I'm sure you deliberated on charging the full amount for cost recovery, and why did you land on not doing that?
Traditionally, when we've introduced new fees like this for the development community, we try and take a phased approach. I think part of it too is trying to understand how many of these we're going to see and the intensity of what that actually is going to be. This is really kind of our first step with the consultant on this, so we wanted to kind of have some time to calibrate it before we looked at what some of those initial steps would be.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jones?
The streetery permit, is that a yearly cost? I know the other one you said it would be $100 annual, but this one didn't have any, or is it just a one-time upfront cost for the streetery permit?
I believe that would be annual, but I'd like my friends in special events to confirm that.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Evan Raleigh with the Manager's Office. Our friend Whitney in Special Events had a unfortunate car situation. That's her reward for getting through Dreamville, so I'm here on her behalf. That is an annual fee. And just to reiterate, what the proposal is that it's a 50% charge relative to the fee that was assessed pre-pandemic for that, the streetery.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then my second question went back to the first 2.7% and 3.4% for inflation. How did you get to those numbers? And I'm totally new to this. I know we've had really, really high levels of inflation, 8%, and this doesn't seem to even come close. So help me, explain to me like I'm 5. Why is it so low?
Sure, that's a great question. So we looked at these rates in January when we were first starting our part of the budget process, setting the department's budgets. So departments that have fees that are increased by these things, we need to have a pretty good number for that then. So these are the numbers that we roll with for the fiscal year.
So the CPI number comes directly from the Department of Labor, and what we do is they calculate the consumer price index or the inflation rate over the last year. They do that annually. So we take the average of that, in this case, for calendar year 23, and that average is taken in January, and that's per code, per your code that we do that. Engineering News report, same way, it takes the value and inflation, thank you, Jared, inflation value of construction materials and construction labor costs, and takes that average over the last year and we apply that to those fees. Yep.
Councilmember Patton?
Hi, I have 2. One's just a comment. I just want to put a big green check mark on the explosives follow-up cost recovery fee. Worked closely with the marshal's office on some constituent services surrounding blasting, and they've been great and really responsive to making sure that development activity that requires blasting is done appropriately, but that is time and labor intensive, and so I'm supportive of making sure we recover the cost due to provide that level of service. My question is around the non-ticketed events fee, so maybe Carrie, I'll ask it while you're coming down. I'm just curious if this is a fee that already exists and we're increasing it, and if curious why it's not maybe rolled into just the venue rental fee, why it's a separate line item.
It doesn't already exist. The convention center is becoming more attractive to our corporate partners who are using more of our venues as we sell it as a complex. And so in a normal performance, we would get ticket facility fees, which helps us maintain the building. And so that helps us keep the rent low. But with this, we don't get any more than that. So we just get the very minimal amount of rent and then lose a lot that we would get on a ticketed event. And so we believe our corporate friends can afford to make up the difference.
Gotcha. And do you think this will be sufficient? Did you consider like a tiered system where smaller events have a smaller fee and larger events have a larger fee?
We didn't. I would be pleased to, but we didn't. A lot of times they're using more than one theater as well. Like Pendo, for instance, who's using the whole venue.
Cool. Well, let us know how it goes.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, I want to thank staff for your presentations and time. And that was a lot to cover today, but thank you, and our meeting is now adjourned.